A warm welcome back to Northampton College. I'm James and we're doing our Scania 113 to 143 conversion. So today we're just finishing off our gauges. So the final piece to the jigsaw is the fuel gauge. Have we got a fault with the fuel gauge or have we just not got enough fuel? So this is where we are today, and we're just going to look at the fuel gauge itself, the tank volume versus how the circuit works. A little bit of theory, a little bit of practical. Hope you enjoy the video, guys. So sit back and relax.
Right, and it's pretty good. It builds up quick.
So today we're going to look at our fuel gauge. So in the last episode, we looked at our coolant temperature sensor and our oil pressure gauge. Now both had a voltage dividing circuit, just like this, where you've got two resistors. And both had a variable resistor as a second resistor. On the coolant temp, it was the engine coolant temp sensor on the engine, and on the oil pressure, it was your oil pressure sensor on the engine, but both had a fixed resistor up at the gauge. And this variable resistor would alter the output voltage, which would raise or lower the needle. So that's what we looked at in the last episode. So today we're going to look at a similar system. It's the fuel gauge, it's a variable resistor, but it's a mechanical resistor. So if you imagine, let's start off by doing some voltage dividing first. So if we've got two fixed resistors there, and let's call them 3 ohms each. And imagine this is no longer an old-fashioned fundamental technology system like what we looked at in the last episode. Let's ramp it up a bit. This could be a digital gauge, the sort of thing that would show a digital bar graph on a gauge now for fuel level. So we've got 12 volts and we've got a collective resistance in this circuit of 6 ohms. So if we do some basic math and we go 12 volts divided by 6 ohms, that gives us a total current flow of 2 amps flowing through that circuit. Now we know the total current flow, what we can do is work out the volt drop over each resistor. So if I go 2 amps times 3 ohms, it will give me 6 volts. So if I look at the volt drop over these two resistors, you've got 6 volts there, 6 volts there. Now if I add those two values together, adds up to the starting voltage. So this is a formula that works. So that's in the ideal scenario where we've got two fixed resistors. But let's make this real. Let's imagine the second resistor is a mechanical resistor like your fuel tank level sensor. So if we've got a big float and when the tank is full, we've got high resistance. That high resistance will raise that output voltage. So if we had a perfect scenario like we looked at earlier and we've got a 6 volt signal there, it would raise that 6 volts. So from a digital gauge perspective, that would show a full bar graph on a gauge. If the tank level was low and then our fuel tank level sensor was also low, that resistance would be low, so therefore that would drop the supply voltage, and that would be reflective upon a 1 bar, for example, on your gauge showing.
Okay guys, so I took the tank sender out, left it connected. Now there's voltage coming from the gauge down this wire, this insulated one, to the sender. So it's basically a voltage dividing circuit, and its ability to flow to ground, there's a ground wire, the other one, is determined upon this resistor. So it's not really a potentiometer because there's only 2 wires, but it kind of is. It's a mechanical resistor, if you like. So I'm going to put it to halfway, like that, and we're going to have a look at the gauge. I suspect it's just the tank needs about $2 million of diesel before it'll start to register. So that should show now halfway on the gauge. There you go, halfway on the gauge. So I'm going to take it to full. So we'll move that now to full. There you go. So that works, doesn't it? So we know it's nothing wrong with that. It's just hasn't got enough diesel in. So it's $180 I've just put in that, and it doesn't even register. So it goes to show how big the tanks are. I think that comes to about there, $180. So the bulb would just be floating on top of it. Okay, fellas. So I'll put it back down to maybe around a quarter. Have a look, and then we put that one to bed for sure. That's not too far out, is it? Just below a quarter, so we know that system works a treat.
That's how simple this voltage dividing circuit is. But what I'm trying to do is simplify technology, because we are a college at the end of the day. So it's not NTC, guys. This is our coolant temp. However, the principle is the same of a variable resistor. All right, it's not oil pressure, because that's pressure driven. This is a mechanical sensor there. Okay, but the principle is the same. It's our fuel gauge, it's a mechanical type resistor, and it's a voltage dividing circuit. Now, what I want to do now is show you a correlation between two bulbs, because we're going to go down into the workshop shortly, and I'm going to do a little test for you to show you that it works with bulbs. A bulb is a resistor in its own right. So if I do the same and I wired up two bulbs of equal value, let's call them 21 watts, the output voltage in the center would be the same. If we started off with 12 volts, we've got 0 volts are negative at the end of the circuit. In the middle, if the bulbs were the same value, you get 6 volts. But just the same, if I then manipulate these bulbs and change the values and make one high resistance, so imagine this is our test light and this is our indicator bulb, okay, so we're making the resistance values different, then of course this test light will use the indicator bulb as its path to ground. So only this one will illuminate because the resistance values are different. So whichever one has a altered resistance value is then going to change whichever bulb is used as a path to ground, and we're going to prove that when we go down into the workshop shortly. So in the same way, we can alter this output voltage. If the bulbs were the same value, you'd get an equal split. But if I change the resistance values of these bulbs and have one from an indicator bulb and then one from the test light, I would expect this to rise. It'd probably go up to 11.8 volts, 12 volts, something like that. You wouldn't get your full 12.6 volts, which we'd normally see on a battery. Okay guys, so we're going to do a bit of a practical session just with some basic equipment that I'm sure all of you guys have in your workshop shed. So we're just going to use 3 bulbs there, and we're going to have a little play with those. We've got battery power, and we're going to have a look at voltage dividing in its realist form and how the circuit will react if I change the resistance. So all of these bulbs are resistors in their own right. Every one of these bulbs has a resistance value. So I'm going to measure the resistance of those now. Okay, so we've got there, it's flashing around a bit, but it's somewhere between 40 and 50 ohms. It's flashing around a bit, you can see that. There you go, it's jumping up to 80. But we've got a resistance reading there, so let's just call it 50 ohms. Okay, so that's bulb number 1. So for bulb number 2, we've got about 7 ohms. Now, of course, this is a PTC device, so as heat goes through it, the resistance value will naturally increase. So the multimeter by default puts a small voltage through the bulb, so it will naturally increase. But we've got there about 7 ohms. Now, when I test it after the bulb's been lit up for a second or two, it will show 20, 30, 40 ohms. So it's always changing being a PTC device. But the point being is we're just trying to get a rough number there. So there's 7 ohms on bulb number 2. Okay, so I'm now measuring bulb number 3. And you can see there, this is really, really low resistance. So this is just about 1 ohm. Just rising and falling there, 1.2, 1.3 ohms. But this one is a really bright indicator bulb. So this is only 1 ohm resistance. So what do I expect to see in my voltage dividing circuit? So if we connect up bulb 1 and 2 to voltage, and we're now going to measure the voltage between the 2 bulbs. So if I come in here now and have a look what this voltage is. There you go, and we've got 6.1 volts there. So that's done exactly what we predicted there. You've got a circuit that's gone from 12.8 volts, measuring end to end, and then we've gone in between the 2 bulbs, and now that's showing 6.1, something like that. Okay, so we're still on voltage now. I'm going to put 2 different bulbs. We're going to add this one in now. Now, if we remember when we measured the resistance of this one, it was low resistance, and this one was probably around 70 ohms, 50 ohms, something like that. But the point being is there's a huge difference in resistance. We measured 6 volts between the 2 bulbs last time. Now we've added this new bulb in, it's low resistance. I predict that the voltage we're going to measure in the middle will be very high, probably close to 12 volts, because this one is low resistance. This bulb I predict won't light up, and this bulb will use the second bulb as its pathway to negative. So this one should light up and this one won't. Let's prove that and test it. There we go, guys. So this is changing the resistance and the outcome of changing the resistance in real terms. One of the bulbs lights up, but the second bulb, that is low resistance, doesn't light up. Now the reason it doesn't light up is because this second bulb acts more like a piece of wire. It's low resistance, so therefore this first bulb uses the second bulb as a pathway to negative. Now let's measure now in the middle. So last time with 2 similar ohm reading bulbs, we had about 6 volts. It almost halved. It was slightly different, but this is going to be different. We're going to get a high reading here because this is a low resistance pathway to negative. So let's prove that. So as predicted, guys, you've got 12.53. Now we started off around 12.8, but it goes to show that that low resistance in this second bulb has changed the outcome of the circuit. This first bulb glows very brightly, but the second bulb doesn't even glow. And what I'm trying to show you here is how a voltage dividing circuit, if we manipulate the resistance value of one of the resistors, we change the outcome of the circuit, and that's how our gauges are working. We're just changing the outcome of that circuit by altering, be it a coolant temp sensor, an oil pressure sensor, a fuel level sensor, and you change the outcome of a circuit. So in the spirit of Team 143, share the video, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one, guys.